So 19 years ago, two students in Belgium, they shared a bad internet connection. So they set up a Wi-Fi link, and they needed a space to talk about the student social life, talking about the status of the connection. So one of them started a message board. And they ran the message board for a while. It was proven to be very useful. So one of them decided to release it to the public. The message of that student was Dries Butert, and the rest, of course, is the history of the Drupal community. So this is the question I want to answer a bit. I wonder how we can keep the same spirit as Dries of releasing software that is useful to ourselves while also bringing value to the community. I hope you're here with me because you share a common concern about the contribution ecosystem, that we still produce software that is useful for everyone, but also keep some benefits to ourselves. In this question, I avoided Drupal, because I think it's referred more like to the product, and I wanted like a broader concept, like the Drupal community. And also since Drupal sailed away from the Drupal island, this is something that concerns every free software community out there. So when I talk about myself, I say that I'm a backend developer. I've been involved in Drupal for more than 10 years. I've been giving talks about testing, about quality of code, and Composer. I'm going to talk about Composer later, since it's a central tool to reuse code. But the main reason I'm talking here today is because I've been through the journey of feeling shy about my contributions and feeling overwhelmed about the Drupal project or any other free software project. And I went from that to implement contribution as a habit in my daily workflow. I'm not a prolific contributor, but I try to do my best. So I'm going to start by what I understand as upstreamable, and then we're going to follow by using Drupal core and the country projects with them. Then we move on to creating the new projects for ourselves as small generic solutions. And then a bit of a workflow that involves this developing in the open. And then some real life examples that I think it will illustrate a bit. So what I'm proposing is not revolutionary at all. It's just small changes that compound to big gains. That's the only thing I'm asking. There is a Romanian saying that goes like, "Cine imparte, parte îți face." Which translates roughly to who makes the split gets a share for himself. It has maybe negative or positive interpretation, but in this context, I think it's about making small parts and sharing them maximizes the benefit, so we keep a big share for ourselves. So if you think I'm nervous today, you should have seen this guy 7 years ago when my college encouraged me to give a talk in a Drupal national event. This is where I feel my contribution journey started. It was a talk about configuring virtual private servers, which were like the new fashion back then. And for me, it was about configuring the web server, researching which packages I need to install, and maybe some obscure configuration. And from my point of view, it was like an altruistic thing that I was doing to share my knowledge with all the attendees of the talk. But also from a more egocentric point of view, I was also making a name for myself by speaking in public for the first time. And also I was learning a lot about Linux servers. And I want to highlight here that not all contributions are code. There is people producing marketing materials, there is people producing designs or talks like this. And I feel those principles that I'm going to talk about now, they also apply to those contributions. But for the rest of the talk, I'm going to talk only about code. So I think it's unfair to talk about rockstar developers. I think it leads to less contributions in the community. Starting from myself, that I feel like a bit of an imposter here talking about contributions when my contribution profile is not that brilliant, but I feel comfortable doing it. I have fun, and I want to share the joy with all of you. Also, events like this are a great way to know that we are all humans, and all those developers are also not superheroes from outer space, but they share the same concerns as we do. Even Dries, from the story I was sharing back then, he was for sure not a rockstar, but by doing that, the small sharing that he did, he started something really big. I know there is a legal disclaimer part to what I'm talking about. Like, for example, who has ownership of the code we're writing, or your productive hours versus your contribution hours. And I don't want to extend on that today, but I hope these are arguments that help you to give to those people who decide which parts of your works are open source. So this is all I understand. This is all I wanted to talk about the upstreamable part. And yeah, I think it's very relevant for people also starting the community, since they see, they come to Drupal because it's freely available, but then they see the community and they want to be part of it. And I tell them, keep on doing what you do day to day to pay your bills or whatever, but introduce small changes to your routine so you can be more part of the community. Maybe be on the lookout for generic solutions, upload small fixes, or just a bit of documentations when you see that the documentation is not complete. Maybe even a small blog post helps to the Drupal community. So that was a bit of an introduction. What I want to talk now is the first part of the journey, when we start using the modules that exist, but maybe we find bugs, or maybe we find improvements that we want to make to them. These are kind of basic steps that cannot be avoided. Without these, not much can be done in the community. So you have a need for your Drupal site, and you start searching. You are probably going to land on GitHub, on Drupal.org, on Stack Overflow, or maybe some documentation for the project that is relevant. Maybe your journey stops there. You find a solution, and you at that point might consider leaving a comment, like, these solutions work, thank you, or the patch delivers what it promises. And maybe for many of you, it might be obvious, but you might pollute this conversation thread. So please apply a bit of common sense. And I think talking about etiquette in these talks is good from time to time. One of the first things I do when I do these searches and the solution is not very clear is subscribing. It's like keeping track on the issue that I have a problem with, and it's like the minimal way of participation. And also some email from time to time won't hurt, and I think it's okay for me, but you can always unsubscribe whenever you want. I recently discovered how to subscribe to Stack Overflow, which is kind of this small star. So at this point, you might feel like you feel shy, you might feel that you will leave a stupid comment, but what I'm asking you is to shake it off those fears and maybe post your current status, how you arrived there, what's your use case, what did you expect to find. Try not to repeat what other people said. That's also a bit of etiquette. And yeah, these things you share might be useful for people who find the solutions, the final solutions, and that person also might be you. So I think it's very useful to document this journey out in public, in the open. Or it might happen things like that. That there is somewhere out there a soulmate with the same problems that we have. And that's when the early notification system that I was talking about is relevant, because there you can leave a comment saying, hey, is this still relevant? Can this be closed? Did you ever find a solution? They will receive an email, and maybe they will help you. Also in this search, this journey that you're doing, searching for some solution for your site, you might end up in a non-interactive site like documentation. And what I recommend you at that point is to read it before interacting more with the maintainers. Or else you might receive an answer like this about reading the fantastic manual. And yeah, you might read documentation, maybe you find missing pieces, and came up with a complete solution. And what I ask you to do there is complete the documentation with those missing pieces. In general, we should drop this overconfidence we have in our memory, like, yeah, I did it once. And since we have hard disks to store the technical details of the free software projects we collaborate with, let's create great documentation together. Another thing you might find is workarounds, which are kind of ugly tricks that the people involved agree that it's not a complete solution. And what I ask you at that point is share them, actually. I mean, maybe other people share their half solutions, and with many of these half solutions, we can build a complete one. Another case for the search is you find someone who produced code in the form of a patch for a fix or a feature you want to add. And one of the mistakes I was doing is apply the latest patch that was available. And I think it's worth the time to ask some questions like, is it a different person who produced the biggest patch than the person who is making the latest patches? Is it a different approach than it was proposed? And these questions are also useful for getting used to contribute. Of course, a quick review of the code is mandatory. And you should become pretty familiar with patches, like there is difference between the patch command and how git apply applies patches. And then you arrive to this situation. You apply the patch, you're happy, and it's time to add them to your own project. If you use Composer, it's very easy. There is the Composer patches plugin for Composer that is in the Composer template for Drupal. But if you are not using Composer, what I can do is encourage you to research a bit, because it's like this morning keynote, they talked about a lot about Composer, and it's becoming a very important part of Drupal. And at that point, since you have the browser tab open, you might give some feedback about the patch, or even if you feel that is complete, you might mark it as ready to be tested by the community, RTBC. I'm more used to the Drupal contribution. That's why I talk a lot about patches. But everything that I said applies also to merge requests, since they are very similar, same questions, same iterations. And as you might have noticed, Drupal.org is going to transition to GitLab. So this is going to be the new normal, the new way of contributing. And this is a little URL trick so you can add merge request to your Composer project. At this point, I searched, I read the docs, the documentation, I left feedback, and I have still no solution. So at this point, if you feel that you cannot come come up with the solution, it's okay, but maybe you need it to go forward in your project. So it's time to take some action in the form probably of a patch. The only thing I ask you now to do is to upload those patches. In the past, I had my little folder where I was hiding my little patches, but I don't do that anymore. I don't think it's worth it. I mean, we have software freedom, and what is more beautiful than exercising that freedom in the open of modifying software? There is nothing to be ashamed of for a modification that you make in a free software project. Also recently, I read a blog post by Lulabot where they explain cases where patches are not enough and they use forks. For example, when you want to patch a dependency that depends on another release, and you need to patch the composer.json of that project, then you probably need a fork. Or maybe you have too many patches to a project, and then you want to apply them, all of them in order. But have in mind that fork shouldn't be forever, so try to contribute those changes back to the original project. Even Lulabot goes a bit farther, saying don't use patches at all. But I think that goes a bit against the workflow I'm proposing today of they have like too many silos. And this also has been discussed in the Drupal community in the transition to GitLab, because Drupal as a community, we always like to have everything in the same thread. We don't want forks to be spread around. And yeah, I talk about Composer because it's the tool I use the most. I use it even for front-end assets with a repository called Asset Packages. It's very cool to check it out. But these things apply to JavaScript with NPM, or to Python with pip, or Ruby with Bundler and Ruby gems. Anyway. So yeah, that's all I want to talk about contributing upstream, but I want to go one step further. I want to go to the moment where you become the upstream. You start your own modules, your own themes, front-end libraries, composer packages, etc. Now you can create full projects at the same level as other contrib projects on Drupal.org. And I think it's a big step for the Drupal community and this workflow that I'm proposing today. And I feel it encourages a lot of contributors to release a lot of code. So before, I was very quick. When I needed a new functionality, I was already creating a new custom module. But now, I like to take a step back. I want to think how I'm going to translate the solution to Drupal pieces. I'm not calling here for crazy abstractions. When you have maybe little alter for strings on your code, or maybe you want to sort the fields of a form, it's okay to have custom modules. But I think it's nice to chop the pieces. It's important also not to go to extremes. So don't make everything reusable. You can, and then making very little pieces of code that, no, I think when we are working in our day-to-day, that's a bit like overdoing it. Think about someone that might have like a similar problem as you have, and go to a middle ground between a quick fix and an over-engineered solution. So yeah, I'm proposing to split the problem in pieces, so we follow the separation of concerns, the software design principle. Chopping in pieces also will make your project more maintainable, and maybe you can have many developers working on different parts of your site. I don't know, I'm thinking like an example, like you have a select option form that is pulling data from a third-party library, a third-party API, and you are tempted to put everything in the same code. That's a bit bad and maintainable. And having said that, I'm not proposing that that's not your first approach. Even senior developers do a quick approach first, and then they separate the different parts of the code. So this is a small example that I want to show for explaining a bit what I understand with this. This is a menu with font awesome icons that are chosen by the editor on the backend. So I didn't find any solution that convinced me. Everything that I find was not exactly what I wanted, or was outdated. So what I envision is adding a text field, a widget for the little icons that I can choose from, and a formatter. So these are the modules that I created. I discovered that the menu items that the users creates are content entities, but they don't have field UI enabled. So I created menu item content fields to fill that gap. I even think it's a very common use case, so I proposed it to Drupal core they have an ideas project queue. There is not much movement there, so if you feel it's useful to add fields to menu items, chime in. Then I added a text field to my menu items, and I produced the next module, which is font awesome fields, which is just a widget and a formatter for font awesome. It creates the previous slide. The formatter is on the right, on my right, on your left, and the widget is in there. Then I needed a way to load the font awesome library, and that I also separated into another module. Why? Because many modules that use the font awesome library can set this module as a dependency, so we share a bit of code. This way, you don't load different versions, and the version of font awesome gets updated because more modules rely on it. Then the fourth module, the third is the library definition, and the fourth module is a formatter, so I can wrap the link item with another view mode, so I can show the icon and the title for the menu item. This is kind of an example of how I try to do it the Drupal way, using the pieces that I have, the fields, the view modes, and just front-end libraries. The history of these four modules is that they were not public from the beginning. I used a little feature of Composer with that little star. I created a folder called local packages, and in there I had my modules. You can see that require is still needed for the custom module, but it's mandatory for you to create a composer.json for those modules. If they don't have it, then Composer won't pick it up and won't install it in the proper folder. Also, in that folder, you can have PHP packages that you can later contribute to Packagist. When, for example, I have to connect to a third-party API, that's the way I use to create the package. So this way of using local packages makes later publishing very easy. Then when I want to publish, it's just uploading the module, remove it from my repository, and update the module, so it takes the module from the public Packagist. I feel that sharing this way must be easy, or it won't happen. I've seen many modules living forever in the module costume saying, yeah, one day I'm going to contribute them. And this way we are leveraging free software characteristics. Maybe one day there is another project that we use, that we want the same functionality, and we can use it in another project without copy-pasting from one project to the other. So the workflow that I use for this is that I let these modules live for a week in my main project. Then I create a project. Remember that now the gates for Drupal.org are open. And I name it carefully so I don't clash with other projects. I don't have to rename and refactor the code. And also, when you do that, remember that at first your module will show in yellow in the releases page. But if you wait 10 more days, you can apply, and you're sure that your module is kind of secure, you can wait 10 more days and apply for security coverage. So there is this other situation when we want to start a new project, but it's not completely written from scratch. It starts from other modules as a base or other themes, and I think there is two cases for this. For example, abandoned projects, but you should be aware that there is a procedure for taking over an old project on Drupal.org, but you have to show that you have like a new version or you have contributed some improvements to it, and then the administrators will give you access to it. Or maybe you have a new approach. You disagree, you have new ideas on how to build it different. At this point, please notify the maintainers of the original project. So for them, it's not a surprise. It's not nice when this happens, and it gives the impression that there is duplicated efforts. And also, when you publish your own module, you have the README, the module description, so you can explain there and link to the similar projects that exist, and explain why you started that project, why you disagreed. So at the end of the day, you want to abstract the problem you have into small common solutions. So you can actually focus on the domain of your client. It doesn't matter if it's the weird way discount coupons are handled, the reservations, or the journey of the user for the donation. You have a chance to abstract the problem and transform those requirements into a specific configuration for the client. So now you are familiar with collaborating with the upstream. You separate your custom parts and create configuration for the different use cases. And now I want to give some small tips on how to navigate this open source world. Be especially kind to volunteers, the people who volunteer to create free software. Don't say things like, there's been a long time with no fix for this. How long is going to take? This rarely help. They might damage your image. Also, don't hide the reasons that you have when you explain your situation. Give as much information as you can, because on the other side, there is a human, and it's going to empathize more with you if you explain your whole reasoning behind. Also, it's very useful to build a reputation for yourself or for your business. I have been in the situation where I've been for some months in a company and I have nothing to show. I have the experience, which is nice for my CV, but it's very nice when I have links to show my work and to prove how I collaborate in the open. It's very cool when you're recruiting. You're going to get the most attractive contributors when they see that you have a public profile for contribution. Also, if you add good marketing on how you give back to the community, that's like the cherry on top. This content can be the project pages, the commits credit, anything that you have to prove that you contributed. So, try to give back some. I don't want to call you to say that people are freeloaders or anything. I mean, there is no shaming when you can contribute. Everyone has their own situations, and I feel very grateful that I have time to contribute, and privileged that I'm here to talk about it today. I feel that little changes, even when you make a little change to documentation, it matters. You are helping reusability, you're making contribution easier, and also for the documentation of your own projects. Give some hints about your own architecture, your motivation for starting the project, or the use case. I think something that I'm adding later is a chat room for where I usually hang out, so people can contact me real time. And yeah, I think it's very important, the contributor experience. That way we can get more code out there. So I want to show some real world examples to explain a bit more of what I understand with the upstreamable way. I plan to release a blog post soon to talk about these things. So I started these 3 small projects. I saw there was an existing theme that I contributed some patches, but I decided it wasn't fit for my use case. So for those who you don't know, Bulma is is a CSS framework comparable to Bootstrap, but it includes no JavaScript, so therefore no jQuery, so it integrates well with modern JavaScript frameworks. I submitted some patches, and I disagreed on how the templates were formed, so I started my own Drupal project. One of the difference it has from the original is how this Bulma CSS was loaded. It had a lot of logic on detecting the local version and then retrieving the different parts from the JsDelivr API, the different versions, sorry. So the user can choose the version that they want to load, or they want to load from the local file system. And I thought, why doesn't every module can have this, not only Bulma? So I created this libraries provider theme. So the user can choose if it's going to load a local version, update the version of themselves. It's all retrieved from the JsDelivr API. But then I saw the code of that was making the calls to the API, and I thought, this is not Drupal. That's no Drupal specific code. So I created a separate small packages package, and I released it to the PHP community. I saw that. So if you see examples that have nothing to do with blocks, with fields, with display modes, you can take them out of the Drupal island and release them on packages, which is the main PHP community repository for code. This is another module. It's related with the libraries provider because it has a dependency on it. And it's kind of my personal crusade against hooks. Hooks for me feel old. So I prefer Symfony events where I can create proper dependency injection, I can do unit testing. But not every hook is in the project yet. So when I find myself writing a .module file, I think, maybe I can contribute this to hook event dispatcher. And it's very easy to write the code, to write the test, and the module is very open to contributions, so it's a pleasure to contribute back. Also, the people I admire from the consolidation projects, what they did is they took Drush, features that were only available to Drush, and they transformed those features into separate packages, like site aliases, configuration. They even produce a great task runner called Robo, which is I use it a lot as a replacement for Grunt and Gulp. And yeah, if you want more information, there is a YouTube video from Seattle DrupalCon, and I recommend you to watch it because it explains the whole process of extracting the functionality. I also love these stories when I see them on social media. I think it happened to a lot of us, like we start digging on a module, we produce a lot of patches, And then we end up not needing everything, but the journey was fun, and we have no regrets. So I want you to go home with at least 3 takeaways. Like, it takes small changes of mindset, but being involved in the Drupal, in the free software ecosystem is worth it. That I have been there in the get it done dirty way of doing things, but I hope this talk is a trigger for you to contribute more code, and that you're not alone facing the struggles when you are using free software and you want to modify it a bit for your own needs. Mulțumesc. Thanks for coming. I categorized this talk first as backend, but it ended up being more like my own contribution experience. Next time I will classify it as community or something. I want to thank the Drupal Developer Days Transylvania organization, the volunteers, the sponsors. And remember, this is just my point of view. Maybe you already implement this, or you have new methods that are working for you. I want to hear your take on the matter. I don't know if there is a microphone for questions. Oh, there is questions. Okay. So, what's your rule? What's your thumb rule to decide when to fork an existing project or create patches? Well, I'll say when the patches are too many or the project as is abandoned. I mean, if I can live with the patch project in my site, it's fine. I leave it like that. And maybe if I come back after some months and see, hey, I had 3, 4 patches for this project and none of them are in, then it's time to contribute a fork. You should consider also the available time you have for yourself for this kind of burden of becoming a maintainer. But it's a better situation that it already existed. So I think it's kind of the process I follow for that. Okay, so a bit ahead of time. I ask you, if you don't have a clear focus on these Drupal Dev Days, like an initiative, I ask you to take a look at your custom code and make it upstreamable so we can make Drupal amazing together. Thank you.